Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion today. It's a discussion, but it's more of a conversation between friends, between fellow photographers who have been documenting mental health for a few years and some for very many years. We also felt this is a good time to discuss this particular topic because not only does mental health have various facets, but it also has its various manifestations that have taken place in very different ways. And we felt that we needed to have a conversation, especially during this pandemic, where a lot of people, not just photographers, who are finding it hard to stay put, but a lot of people who are working from home, and it's becoming hard because many, especially independent artists, are not able to find work. And the impact of not just the pandemic, but overall, where does mental health play a role in our lives? And that's the conversation we wanted to have today. Uh, I would also like to inform everybody who's joining in that some of the presentations will have graphic images. So this is a trigger warning because some of the work is uh, quite strong, it shows a bit of sort of impact of violence. And therefore, any of you who is not comfortable, um, I just request you to be a little prepared for this. But these are also important conversations that we need to have. And therefore, today I welcome, we have here with us Robin Hammond. Hi, Robin. Thank you so much for making the time. We also have Ronny Sen joining us from Kolkata. Hi, Ronnie. Thanks so much. And we have Arun Vijai Mathavan from Kanyakumari. Hi, Arun. Good to have you with us again. Chandan Gomes will be joining us in some time. He had something pressing that just came up, and he will be joining us soon. Sindhuja Parthasarathy, who we were really hoping to have with us, is unfortunately unwell and she could not make it today. But we will still have this conversation today, and hoping that you all will have some thoughts to share with us towards the end of the conversation in the form of questions or comments. So thank you once again, and over to Robin. Hi, Robin.
Hey.
Good to have you with us. How have you been? How are things at your end during this period and during this time?
So I'm in Manchester in the northern England, and we are looks like we're about to head into another lockdown here.
Right.
Liverpool, which is just down the road, has gone into a sort of what they call a tier 3, a stricter level. So we are about to hit that as well. But lockdown's been really strange for me, because in January I had my first child, and so I haven't been able to travel. And so while lockdown has been and COVID-19 has been horrendous for a lot of people, for me, it's actually been an amazing experience to spend this time at home. And I haven't spent this many months in one place for the last 20 years. So to be able to have this time with my little daughter has actually been really amazing. But that's not to take away, of course, the seriousness of the issue. And I know that, people in their hundreds of thousands are literally dying. And I really feel for those people who, not just those who have lost loved ones, but who are really struggling with having to isolate. And I think that once again, mental health is the sort of the neglected impact of crises. I feel like it's a duty for all of us to be able to, where we can, speak more about mental health, and for those of us who are storytellers, to maybe to amplify the voices of people living with mental health issues, so that they can be valued and heard, and so that all of us can understand the impact of crises.
Right. Right. And I want to go back to your work in my world that I think started in 2011, and which has taken you to many, many countries. And through this particular body of work, you've also tried to influence governments and corporations, to consider the rights of some of the most vulnerable members, in society. You also founded Witness Change, which is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to advancing human rights through visual storytelling. So could you maybe share a little bit about this particular work, and how did Witness Change come about?
Sure. Well, I mean, maybe what I could do, if you want, is I can show some pictures at the same time.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so let me do that, because rather than people look at
it would be nice to also see some work.
I can see pictures. Yes. Okay, so let me see if I can work out this technical stuff. I'm just going to share my screen. Let's see, share that, and let me see if I can make this work. So yeah, what I'm just going to show right now is just a series of images, actually, which are not about mental health, but I feel like it's important to talk about the context of why I started this work before I really get into it. So this is all work from my early career, and I'm showing it because I spent 10 years working as a working photojournalist, but I started off as a photojournalist because I thought it was, this could be work that was, exciting and interesting, but on the other hand, maybe could be for a slightly lost young man that I was at the time, could give me some purpose, and maybe idealistically, I thought maybe it's a way to contribute to maybe creating this better world. But I struggled, like so many artists and photographers, struggled so much in my early career that all my time was spent just trying to pay my rent, and I felt that I had made the beginning of 50 great stories, but I could never really follow them through. And then this all culminates in going to South Sudan in January 2011. In fact, South Sudan wasn't a country at the time. I went there to cover the referendum for independence. So Sudan was one country, and the people in the South were voting to become their own country. And you can see pictures here of people with ink on their fingers to prove that they had voted. Now, these are not particularly striking images, I feel, of a referendum for independence. And this was part of the problem for me when I arrived in South Sudan in 2011. There were, hundreds of camera crews and photographers and journalists, and I didn't feel like I was able to contribute anything new or different or any sort of unique perspective. So I was working with a journalist friend, and we really thought we had to try our best to tell the story in a different way. So we were, and it was incredibly hard given the number of journalists there. So we were driving down this road in Juba, this dusty road, and I see a young girl with a mental health issue begging on the side of the road. And I say to the driver, what happens to people with mental health issues in this country? And I asked that given that, they've had 20 years of war and millions of people have been killed and displaced, and, there's very little infrastructure. And he says, we put those people in prison. So I said, okay, stop the car. Let's go to the prison. And we managed to negotiate access, and, the stench was unbearable. And there were these dozens of people who were shackled to the floor, a floor where they were fed on this floor, they defecated on that floor. The conditions were filthy. But I have to confess that as a journalist, I was excited because we'd found the story, but that was really overshadowed by the horror that I was witnessing. And then there was this one young man who had a particularly strong impact on me, and he was separated from the others, and he was down one end of a cell, and he didn't look at me or speak to me, but I thought, I really need to take his picture because he really seemed to encapsulate the vulnerability, but also the abuse that people were facing. So I crouched down to take his photograph, but then I paused, and I'm suddenly conflicted because I didn't know whether actually it was right to take his photograph or not. So there were many other people in the cells that I had photographed, and they were able to, in their own way, let me know that I could photograph them or not, but he wasn't. So I was conflicted. Is this the right thing to do? So on one hand, I thought, no, hang on, I'm here to gather evidence of a human rights abuse, and that's the most important thing I can be doing right now, and surely that makes it right. But in my head, I also had this counter argument, that here is an individual with a right to privacy and decency, and in fact, by taking his photograph, am I abusing his rights further? And I thought, if this was me or my brother or my son, would I be okay with this image appearing on the front page of the newspaper? And this is all happening in like a minute in my head. And so I strike this silent deal with him, and I say to myself, and this is how I justify it, and people can judge whether or not this is right or not, but the way I justify it is, I say to myself, well, if I'm going to take these pictures, they really have to make a difference. It can't just be, to get a byline or a front page of a magazine or newspaper. It's like this has to be something that really makes a difference for people in vulnerable situations like this. So I took the pictures, obviously, because you can see it. I left Juba, and the story became, this is a hopeful time for a new nation, but at what costs? And there were the obvious costs of death and destruction, but maybe the less obvious impacts of psychological damage as well. And so it was published, in several places, and I had these visions of aid agencies going in and saving these people, but I couldn't see it happening. So I started emailing people in Juba, and the message I keep kind of getting is that, yes, we understand that this is a serious issue, but we in fact have other priorities. And this is the beginning of conversations that I would see where the answers often came back as, mental health is always someone else's job. So I thought maybe I can really make photography make a difference here, because obviously there's a lack of connection between what's happening to people and the reality and the impact that could be, the change it could be making. So for the next 2 years, I traveled around 10 sub-Saharan African countries to document the mental health impacts of conflict and displacement and corruption and neglect. And this work became about, the mental health impacts of horrors experienced, but also what happens to people with existing mental health issues when the infrastructure of care collapses. And I produced this work called Condemned, which was published in a book and magazines and exhibited all around the place. But and that's great that it helped to raise this awareness. But I had made a promise to make a difference, and what I was seeing is, even though people were seeing the work, change wasn't necessarily happening. So I decided I needed to try and make work with a much more deliberate change focus in it. This French non-governmental organization called Handicap International, they saw the work in South Sudan. And at that time is interesting, because even that big organization like that, they were struggling too. They were struggling to get people to connect to the issue of mental health. It was too abstract. Many of these humanitarian organizations, they have to essentially, compete for resources, and things like, malaria and TB and HIV, these were much more tangible issues that people were willing to put money into, and so they should, because these are very important. But mental health, which is maybe much more silent and unseen, they were really struggling to get funding. So we spoke and said, okay, how can we create some work that doesn't just outrage people, but also provokes empathy? And how can we get the audience in some small way to step into the world of the people whose lives I was documenting? So, the objective was to create this personal connection between the audience and the people I was photographing. And, photographs like this, from Togo, which is a small country in West Africa, where you see the man on the right, he's praying over the man in the middle, who has a chain around his ankle, trying to create this connection between the audience and the viewer, and telling the stories. So rather than just documenting an issue, we're actually telling the stories of people. And this is from a prison in Madagascar, and this is South Sudan. So I'm not going to explain every single image, but I think that you kind of get the idea of what I was trying to do here is create this connection. And so with Handicap International, I went to 4 different countries, including Lebanon here, where I was documenting the lives of Palestinian refugees, many of whom were residing in Syria when the war came, and they had to flee to Lebanon.
Could you probably maybe share a little on how do you explain wanting to document like an institution, that is treating people with mental health challenges, and get permissions for the kind of work that you have done? Because I know that that's the first challenge that any photographer faces. Everybody is wary of how and where these images are going to be used. So maybe could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. What I might do is can I come back to that question in about 2 minutes?
Of course.
Because I'm going to show something which is relevant to that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what I'm showing you now is a series of photographs made in a portable studio, which I carried around these countries, which was a real big piece of work to put together and take down every day. But in order to create these photographs, but I did it also so that I could make some videos, and I wanted just to show a couple very quickly. They're pretty short. Yes. And then I'll come back to your question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Takul tiapa kula moyang ngaba pada dal bol kalenga dango jiska molana tamu tabo lebu kula wam me moya anje porte kalenga donc lebe gonjili le somena na machina na Mo da man mo tan che mo pa ka che ya. Ya mo ko mo se. Mo ete normal ngana.
And I'm just going to show one more where we have the combination of both the reportage images and the portraits and the voices.
سيين ما تم سيين ما محل مناسب كل عشان من بقدر بيجيني فوقه مفروض من مبين ده محل تمام خاص المهم بيجيني فوقه. My name is Martha Lege Simon. I'm a social worker in Juba Central Prison. عشان ما في محل ما معروف إنه بس تيجي ده أو محل تمام. والله محل ده ما كويس لأنه حسي بيجا بس بيجيبومون يعني بيجا عدد بيجا كتير شديد لدرجة إنه محل بيجا ديك وعم برسمون لبس 2 يوم في دخول يعني بدخلوا 3 نفر في يوم كم نفر يلا بيجا يجيني ديك شديد يعني حياتهم بطل من برا وجوا نزاتوا مرات من شكله من عشان محل ديك عشان في سجن هناك اسمهم قاكل أكل التماساجين ده ما مفروض أكل هم باكل قاتوا هناك بيجا مع مجرمين مرات بدقومون جوا هناك وما كويس. أنا بتمنى إنه لفترة إنه كان ما في تغيير بقى بحاولوا في سجن. والله لقدام أنا بشوف إنه يا ريت إنه بعينوا لهم محل خاص لهم عشان بقدروا يعينوا مشاكل اللي بيواجههم دي.
So just to answer your question, Shuchi, so I mean, every case is different. So in that prison, for example, they allowed me to go in because that was, at the time, it was the referendum for independence, and the South Sudanese regime at the time thought of themselves being very progressive in that they were allowing prisoners to vote. I mean, basically, the South Sudanese regime just wanted as many votes as they could, so they said, okay, prisoners can vote as well. So they were allowing media to go into film the prisoners voting. And when I told them, actually, my interest is actually people with mental health issues that I hear, to be honest, they didn't really care. And I think that was more of a reflection of their attitude towards, people with mental health issues is that, they were, they're almost treated as they're very marginalized, and you could almost say seen in some circumstances as being, subhuman. So why would you worry about anyone documenting them? I mean, other circumstances, there were places that I went to where people totally understood that the way that people with mental health issues were being treated was not ideal, but where they felt like, that where they recognized that this was the wrong place and they were the wrong people to be caring for them, but they were given no choice. And then there are other places, and I'll show you some in a minute, from places what they call like prayer camps, which is a religious institution where a lot of people are taken for all manner of health issues, but often it's mental health issues, who totally think that chaining somebody up is appropriate. So they don't see anything wrong in what they're doing. And then, and then there are other cases where, people are very aware that the optics of having somebody in a chain or behind prison bars is not good, and they would much rather me not be there. And there are some of those places I had to, I was going there to document this evidence of these human rights abuses, and I was willing to not seek the permission of the gatekeepers of those institutions. But you'll see some more, and I can refer back to that a little bit more as we go.
Right.
But just to continue about this work with Handicap International, one of the things that was important with that was, one, showing the individuals that connecting this making this connection between audience and the person being photographed, but also what an important aspect of work that they were interested in was what they called disabling environments. And a disabling environment might be living in poverty, or other environments that create or exacerbate mental health issues, like living as a refugee, or living in war, or in prison, where I did a lot of work. So I worked in this prison in Madagascar, and we had full permission from the government to go there. The condition with them was, you can photograph in the prison, but you can't show anybody's face.
Yeah.
Which was a real challenge, especially when you had, a room like this. It's like, how do I not show someone's face? But they required that they see all the images, and they would choose whether or not I was allowed to publish them. But in the end, they had no problem with the work being published. But when we consider like what is a disabling environment, if you have to live like this, like you see these young men in this condition, this is not going to be conducive to having mental wellness. And here, sorry.
Maybe the question that I wanted to just quickly ask over here is, it's one thing about what the institutions or the publications want, because in terms of the documentation or the photographs, but where does the photographer stand? And you could be photographing many things, but for example, just to go back to the image of or a couple of images where the person is in the nude. Now it's a call that one takes in terms of whether that is all right, and who decides that, the consent for something like that. Does it come, do we have to really be dependent on the institution for something like that? Or is that a call that a photographer needs to make? Very often, even if we get access, how to maybe perhaps show somebody who's not in the capacity to offer consent. I wanted to open up a little bit of that, while you're showing this work. So if you could share some of your thoughts over there.
Yeah, totally. And this is, the dilemma that I referred to right at the beginning, right, of photographing this young man who didn't have the capacity to give consent, and whether or not that is an appropriate thing to do. And since then, there have been many times when I've decided not to photograph someone, or not to show their face, so they can't be identified.
Yes.
If they are in a not able to give full consent, or have a full understanding of why I'm there or what we're doing. Yeah, and it's really, it's I don't think it's a necessarily a black and white issue. I think that there's a couple of different sort of theory of ethics around what's called consequentialism versus deontological ethics. It's like, if you're a consequentialist, you think that the outcome justifies the morality of the actions, or if you're a deontological ethical thinker, then maybe it's the actions themselves which need to be judged. And I think that I think most of us are consequentialists in hindsight. And I've actually asked, when I've shown the picture of the young man, when I've asked, or when I talk about the impact of the work, most people say, no, it was great that you took that picture because of the outcome of what happened, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But at the time, I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. So it's like, does it make it okay? And I don't have a straight answer, and I think that it is complicated, because you also have, to take another a real life example where there were people who objected to having the Nazi concentration camps photographed, because they felt some people were being showed in an undignified way. But I think that 75 years later, it's vital that happened. There are people who deny that took place, and to have that documentary evidence is really, really important. So yeah, it raises a lot of really important questions. When I've been doing work most recently with Human Rights Watch, we had there was an internal debate within the organization. People who, this is a very respected human rights organization. It's like, are we there to document evidence? And can we do that in a way that still respects people's privacy and dignity? And even there wasn't a clear answer. So is really case by case. And I think that, I think you have to be very careful and always be acting with, integrity.
Sure.
I'm sorry, that doesn't give you a black and white answer, but
no, I don't think there is a black and white answer, but it's something personal to each photographer, how they feel about it. And it's a conflict I myself have been dealing with when I started working on mental health as a theme and as a topic. And a lot of times I've often questioned this. So it's just good to have this discussion.
Yeah. And I think it's also, we have to be very, very careful as storytellers, because I think often our priority is to get the images that we feel are going to be most impactful. Yes. And I think that we also have, at the same time, have to be listen to that internal voice that's giving you the reason as to why it's okay, and just sometimes take a more cautionary approach and maybe not take the photograph. So what I'm just showing you now is just talking more about these disabling environments in these refugee camps in Lebanon. But I think what I want to just quickly just talk about now is this picture of Helen. Yes. Now this is, I think, the flip side of what we're actually talking about. So this is another person from South Sudan with a mental health issue, but she agreed to pose for her portrait. She gave me written formal consent, and unlike the other man I photographed, I know her name. And I think that this was essential in the telling of her story. And her image went on to win a World Press Photo Award. And when the judges spoke about this image, I was told that as it went through the rounds, they kept remembering, as the picture came up, they were like, oh, and here's Helen again. Which for me spoke volumes about the importance of respecting individuals and communicating through individual stories, and that the power of authentic humanizing stories over just talking about issues. And this has been something I've tried to do a lot more with my work, is make sure that here's the story of Margaret Conga. So with all the sort of social media that I'm doing, I'm always trying as much as possible to make sure we have the voice of the person, who they are, and make sure that we're talking about respecting them as individuals and not treating them as an issue. Right. So I think just in talking about trying to make an impact with this work, I'm in a massively privileged position to have this access to the National Geographic account, which has something like 140 million followers. And so, we have the opportunity to have these people who have been completely marginalized to have their voices heard around the world. And for this Handicap International work, we are able to reach an estimated 5 million people with that work.
So we'll come back to the question of privilege and who has the right to tell whose story, maybe a little later. Maybe if it's okay, Robin, I will invite our next panelist and we can come back to some of this discussion, because I do have some more questions, and maybe we can just come back to those in a bit.
Okay.
Right?
So you need me to stop sharing my screen? Is that what you want?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you so much, Robin. I mean, I think this is a great beginning to this conversation, and I'm sure there will be quite a few questions that will emerge from this. I would like to now invite Ronnie Sen, who's a photographer based in Kolkata, and we are very excited to also be screening his film tomorrow. So maybe many of you might know Ronnie already, but if you don't, he's a film director, a writer, and a photographer. His debut film, Cat Sticks, which we are screening tomorrow, premiered in the competition section at Slam Dance in 2019, where it won a jury award as well. Ronnie's work on drug abuse is what we would like to discuss today. So Ronnie, hi, thanks so much.
Hi.
Could you just maybe share with us about how and why did you decide to make a film? I know that you were documenting a lot about drug abuse and the so-called morality in society that gets associated with it, and of course the stigma. But maybe how did you come about to taking this work forward? Could you share a little bit of background?
So I was basically experimenting a lot with videos at one point, and some of my friends who were associated with filmmaking and who have been making films, they suggested that if I would be interested to make a film, and that's how it began in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And when they told me to consider an idea for a possible film, the stories of addiction and the violence drug addicts and alcoholics face in the Indian society at large. I mean, this was the only thing that I could think of. I had always imagined, uh, sort of, not imagined, but I've always kind of thought about making a film
Mm-hmm.
about the stories, these stories that I've grown up with. A lot of my friends were facing this kind of, weird kind of violence from the society. And so that's how it began. And as far as the medium is concerned, I've always sort of realized that whenever I tried to photograph these things, it always felt kind of risky, and it didn't feel right in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And film became a proper medium for
Mm-hmm.
this story, and I have told it before that whatever is problematic in the present is a photograph, and whatever is a unresolved past is a film. Because end of the day, the kind of stories that I wanted to tell were stories which were 15, 20 years ago. And for me, it always felt a little strange to uh, sort of stage them, or anyhow, I mean, film was the only medium for it. And I mean, in this process, I sort of got to make a film. And
Right.
I'll just share some
Sure.
bits of it.
Yes. I mean, your
I
film
mean,
has
there was
been
a
called A Sympathetic Portrait of Addiction. Uh, I was reading somewhere, and maybe you could speak about that as you show a little bit from the film, just a snippet uh, with our audience here today.
uh, I mean, sympathetic.
Or empathetic,
Uh,
I would rather say. I don't know. The article mentioned sympathetic, but I would say
uh,
perhaps more empathetic. And that's where the difference comes in, because you wanted to perhaps show people who are addicted to drugs as human beings and not just people who are need to be discarded, or
yeah, I mean,
maybe you could
see,
share your thoughts a little bit about that.
uh, I mean, for me, it was more about the film begins with the line, "This is for my dead friends to come back from the night."
Yes.
So I don't have any baggage, or I don't have any. Uh, I never felt any pressure to be answerable to anyone, or to be politically and morally correct or anything, because this was mainly for my friends who are not here in this world anymore. And it's about a uh, certain kind of ostracization from the society,
Yes.
which all of us have always felt. So it was all coming from a sense of truth and urgency, and uh, something that I really felt for a long time to share with the world.
Hmm.
Because addiction, as far as drugs is concerned, is heavily misunderstood, and there is a lot of morality and there's a lot of law in place which is which focuses on punishing the drug addict more than helping the drug addict, you know.
True.
And I mean, it's not only about addicts alone. I mean, I look at it as a failure of modernity, the way mental illness has been looked at, the obsession of psychiatry to cure insanity, you know, and to think that every person will basically, every person will be normal. This obsession. This is something that I've always found impractical, you know, and this is something that I wanted to challenge. And it's not that I've read somewhere or it's based on research or anything. I mean, there is no research, you know, it's just our life in general and what we had seen around us. And the fact that, you know, addiction and addiction treatment and the way we look at it here, it has to be founded on science and empathy and basic human rights and health rather than prejudice and morality of any kind. And this is the reason, you know, when this recent Bollywood fiasco happened with this high profile drug scandal, I wrote an article about, you know, amendment of the NDPS Act, which is our only act in India to sort of punish the people who have been consuming sort of drugs. And recently, the government came out with a notification that they want to amend the law and they want to change it, and they are looking forward to recommendations from the public. Anyhow, so the film now is, you know, available on movie for you know, the public to go watch the film. But the larger conversation about drugs and alcohol is it's a battle which is going to take a long time, because even the most liberal and the educated class also is in the dark, because in newspapers or magazines or journals or in arts, in theater, music, in different mediums, we don't hear the stories of addiction. And I can understand why that is so, because you know, the narcotic substances have come recently in India. It has come as late as the 80s. So it's a problem that precisely my generation and the immediate earlier generation had kind of faced. So there's a lot of confusion around it. So when I wrote the article, which was published on Academy Magazine, Academy Mag, and then it was republished on Scroll, I mean, there was a lot of interest around it. And we are also trying to make a draft to send the government, you know, with our recommendations. And, you know, there are some basic sort of ideas that all drug use and drug consumption should be decriminalized, which is a WHO mandate. Like we have seen in India that the government is talking about what the WHO regulations are in the context of the COVID-19 all the time, like ICMR and everybody, you know, the health ministry, they're always saying WHO said this, WHO said that. So our recommendation is also going to be on what the WHO mandate is, which is, you know, decriminalize all drug consumption and make laws where you don't put people behind bars for consumption. And the idea is very simple, that you, if the state or if any state, for example, is spending money to deal with drugs, then it has to be about the care, the care, of people who are the most affected, rather than putting that money to punish them and spend it on agencies and etc etc, because India's NDPS Act was primarily made because of the pressure of the USA's war on drugs. And we had to become an ally of America's war on drugs, which was a huge failure, and there are a lot of organizations in America who are working now. Something like weed or cannabis, which is absolutely legal in India, had to be made, illegal, and it was criminalized in the 80s because US decided that, they want to ban marijuana, they want to ban cannabis. Cut to 2020 when, we had a screening in Los Angeles. We had, I think, a couple of screenings in Los Angeles last year, and you can buy cannabis on the counter in US. So if you go to the NCB website, the only agency, the law enforcement agency in this country who looks at enforcing NDPS, you will see that they have written very clearly that our mandate is to ally with the international treaties and etc etc. So those treaties have changed. If India made their NDPS Act and NCB was formed to basically become an ally of USA's war on drugs, that entire discourse has changed, but we have to catch up. But sadly, there is no organizational effort in changing all these things. So we are taking baby steps. The film was not made to make it a kind of a propaganda of any kind. It was more of a expression of, other things.
I think it also emerged from a very personal space for you, because it does come from some friends you have lost, and what you wanted to convey about drug abuse. A little bit about, so maybe you could share some of the stories, that have emerged from the film itself, in terms of humanizing these people, and again, I know that I'm putting them in a category called these people, which itself is the problem. So maybe could you share a few instances, let's say in the making of the film, with our audiences that could, bring out what you might have wanted to convey and how difficult it was when you were actually making the film?
The idea was to tell people that these people exist, and you look at them through. The idea is to tell people that drug addicts and alcoholics exist in the society. They face a lot of violence. They face a lot of ostracization. Like in modern societies, you always put the madmen in asylums, etc. And we have seen enough of that in Robin's work before. And it's a certain obsession of modern societies and psychiatry to treat everyone. And that has created havoc in our lives. So my idea was to show people that these people are normal, regular people, and addiction, alcoholism is a kind of a illness which can happen to anyone. And it's an illness like diabetes, for example. And when you say that, why can't you quit drugs? It's not so easy. It's like telling somebody who has diabetes or cancer that, why can't you just, why can't you cure yourself from cancer or any disease which is incurable, for example? And if you don't arrest it, that disease is progressive and fatal at some point. So these are the kind of conversations that I wanted to have with people. And I was reasonably successful, I would say, wherever we have gone with the film. People have responded to it in a very sort of, a lot of people have become emotional, and a lot of people have understood, because it happens in every family. It's not that, drug addiction happens to a certain class or caste of the society, and it's limited to a certain section. It's not that. It can happen to anyone. And there are so many people among our friends, within our families, who have had problems with alcoholism, with addiction, but they never got any kind of support or, the compassion or empathy. So today, if there is a family in India who have a son or daughter who has a problem of addiction or alcoholism, they simply don't know what to do. So my primary objective was to make people aware that what really happens. Say of a co-addict, a family member who has an addict in the family, sees a girl or a boy walking out of the home in the morning, coming back, for example, they look at the effect that his health is deteriorating, or her health is deteriorating, or the career is gone, the relationships are gone, etc., etc. But what exactly happens with the girl or the boy? The film tries to look at that. Say family members of society, they look at certain effects and events, or not only events, they see an effect, but they never kind of see the journey of a drug addict. This film tries to make people sort of come closer. This is kind of a bridge between the addict and the non-addict in a certain way.
And I think it also really comes from this space of so many people in society trying to define normal. What is normal? Normal could be very different for different people, but society is, and laws, riding on the idea of fear more than care, as you were mentioning, to normalize human beings, to make them follow a certain path so that society can function in supposed proper ways. And maybe let's just come back to a very, maybe you've answered this question quite often, but how did the name Cat Sticks come about?
It's a wax matchsticks. Basically,
right.
If you are chasing brown sugar in a foil in South Asia or poorer countries where you don't have heroin, but you have the derivative of heroin, which is it's dirty heroin, which is brown sugar. If you are chasing it, then you need a wax matchstick for a uniform flame. So it's just a catalyst, and it's a kind of it's the name of a company who make wax matchsticks, basically. So this is just a catalyst to smoke brown sugar. The thing is, if you have everything and you don't have this, you can't smoke it. So in a way, it becomes an integral part of junkie's life if someone's smoking it. That's about it.
Right. And you've just shared some snippets from the book that you had published, from the film stills and some of the photographs. Is there maybe just a small trailer or something that we could see?
I can share a trailer.
Yes, that would be nice.
দাদা তো বড় শ্বাস নিচ্ছে না রে। দাদা, ও গাড়ি মেডিকেল কলেজ নিতে হবে না, সোজা নিমতলা শ্মশান নিয়ে নিন তো।
বড়া হেভি বেড়ায় আছি তো, মালটা খাই এবার। कैसी आई दुर्गा जी? কি রে বললি, সামনে দেখাবি? নদী থেকে নিয়ে আসলি কেন রে? কি হয়েছে দাদা?
মিলে মিশতে করাবো। জল জমে যাবে।
पहला तल्ला में गांजा और जुआ, दूसरा तल्ला में दारू, तीसरा तल्ला में पत्ता। मतलब टोटल लास वेगास बना के रखा था इसने लेक टाउन को। अब शुरू हुआ केस।
Thanks for that, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just maybe, just to wrap up a little bit on the film, I wanted to check, of course, the location of the film. And I saw the film when it got released on Mubi, back then. And I was very curious to understand, how did you go about choosing the location of the film and, maybe creating some of the really real experiences, one is that the film is completely in black and white, which itself is quite interesting. So maybe could you talk a little bit about the locations and your journey from a photographer to a filmmaker, which you touched upon a little earlier, but maybe now that everybody's seen the trailer, if you could maybe share a little more about that.
I mean, the most difficult part of being a filmmaker, especially if you are a photographer, is to make peace with the fact that a lot of other people are also making decisions. And you as a director are responsible for everything. But end of the day, you have to trust a person. And it's a everyday battle. And you lose on some days, you win on some days, and it's about balancing, like what you can live with end of the day. So it's a constant negotiation. And it's also about working with so many people that I found it initially extremely difficult to work with so many people. But then slowly, steadily, I got into it and I learned a lot. And I loved this medium. And obviously, I love photography, and this is what I've been doing for, probably like 14, 15 years now. But a film has a way more larger audience. If you are a photographer in Europe or America, you do have an audience where newspapers and magazines are still commissioning, and things can happen. Photographs are shown publicly. There are museums and there are institutions which give photographers a lot of importance. But in India, I think in the last 10, 15 years, things have only gone downhill as far as using sort of photographs for kind of, our daily things. Obviously, there are way more photographers than ever, and people have been doing a lot of interesting work in the last 10 years or so. But what Robin was showing, the kind of work and the kind of organizations he has been collaborating with, you can't do that in India, sadly. So even if you are an Indian photographer, we have to beg from the West So this constant begging is a problem. And a film definitely, not only it does have a bigger audience, but it's a different medium.
Yes.
And what I was saying, that there are stories, and there are stories which can only be told through photography. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's not a statement where, it's not possible. It's not like that. That's not what I mean. But for me, there are stories which can be told through uh, photography, and there are things which can be told through a
Perhaps better
film.
for films. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that, the kind of response I had with Cat Sticks and the way people have reacted to the film, it would have been very difficult for me if it was a photo book or an exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'll give you a small example. The first screening in Calcutta which happened of the film, there was a storm, and it was raining for the whole day, and we were playing in the Calcutta Film Festival, and we were, part of the pool section, which is the international competition section, and we got the biggest screen at Nandan. And when I was going to Nandan from my home, I thought that nobody will turn up. Who's going to come, in this rain and so much of storm and everything. And I went there and I saw that there is a queue of 600 people, like 3 hours before the film. 600 people are waiting outside the theater with umbrellas. And that uh, told me a lot about the power of the medium. Say, for example, when we make books and we make, 300 editions or 400 editions, and now you have one screening and 1,000 people watch the film. And then if you look at the disparity, I mean, or the difference, it's massive. And that told me a lot. It's not that I'm very, it's not that I'm leaving photography and just only going to make films. It's not that, but both are very different mediums.
Of course. Of course. Great. Thank you so much, Ronnie. I think it's very important today that we are talking about mental health more than beyond this moral crisis that exists in society, because any direction that we speak about, any issue that we speak about with regards to mental health is more of a moral issue than the actual issue per se that needs to be dealt with. And I think with regards to drug abuse, your film has really touched upon the personal lives of these people who you're trying to show, and maybe a bit of their daily lives and what it means to be a drug addict, maybe even their struggle, which I think has become a bit of a stereotype, whether it was in other films that we have seen, but also how can you maybe connect a little more with how the struggle is so real, and the kind of support system that perhaps somebody who is addicted needs. So thank you so much for sharing that. Just
Thank
for
you,
everybody to know that we are screening Ronnie's film tomorrow. The link is available on the CPB Learning Lab bio on Instagram and on our website. So you can sign up before 6 p.m. today, maybe while we are still conversing with each other, and see the film tomorrow. It's a very good film. You must catch it if you can. And it's also available on Mubi. So thank you, Ronnie. And
thank you, Suchi. Thank you very much.
I will now like to invite Arun, Vijai, Mathavan. And before I do that, my request to the audience is that in case if they have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. with the respective name of the panelist that the question is meant for. We will be addressing questions towards the end. So I now move on to welcoming Arun Vijay. Hi, Arun. Good to have you back with us
Hi,
again.
Vijay.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Right. How are
How are
things
you?
down there in Kanyakumari? I know we are not
It
too
was
far
raining
off.
hard.
Right.
Yeah. It was raining for very badly. Then now it came to a good
Okay.
situation now.
And I mean, the pandemic, are you able to move out? Are you able to maybe make some work or
No,
right now?
for working, not possible, but we could move out. We could go to
Right.
places
Right.
with all precautions.
Right, right. Okay. Okay,
Mm.
good to know that. Just for everybody to know, Arun Vijay Mathavan is a graduate from the National Institute of Design in India. He is also a member of PEP Collective and is keenly interested in documentary photography and exploring issues of spaces with its relation to the environment. Uh, I want to read out the quote that Arun shared with us because he has made a seminal work on the Dalit rights issue in India with respect to the mortuary and the work that they do over there. And I'm just going to quickly read out the quote before we begin this conversation. And Arun says, in India, those classified as untouchables or Dalits have been forced to handle the dead for centuries. The manner in which they are compelled to do this in modern state run hospitals just goes completely unnoticed and undocumented. Tasked with endowing dignity on the dead, they face a social death. Uh, Arun, I know we were very, very grateful and fortunate to have your work as part of the last edition of the Chennai Photo Biennale. And I think that itself opened up a lot of conversations with a lot of people because I must warn everybody this work might be a bit graphic. So I leave that choice to you if you would like to continue to maybe see the work. But Arun, could you share a little more? I know that it's one thing to be talking about the rights of a particular community in India that is heavily dominated by caste and the caste system. But could you also maybe talk about how this impacts your own mental health in the process? Because I feel that while, as photographers, we all go out to document important stories, but I think we often tend to ignore and maybe not even realize the kind of impact that this is having on you per se. So maybe let's start with seeing some of the work, and if you could share a little background into it, and then come to how the work has impacted you as well. Yeah. So if you could share your screen.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. So I started this work at 2016, and the intention behind doing this work is how the caste evolves during the time. The first thing is caste is something which is not even an Indian word. It is a Spanish and a Portuguese word called casta, which refers to a tribe or a set of people in a group. And the historical evidence of caste goes back to Rig Veda and the Nandanath story in Periya Puranam. So, in a way, if we see um, the past 1,000 years or 2,000 years, we have changed a lot, as a human being. Like the basic necessities, like food, shelter, and home. Food, shelter, and the apparels, whatever we wear. It got evolved so much. We don't do the same thing as we were doing at 1,000 years back. But this one thing, this caste, which is being followed from the old time to the current day. It is the one thing which is very common. And I was thinking, since all other necessities for a human which is being changed, but this why we are sticking to that caste for a even now. So, and how powerful the caste should be to be followed at the current situation. Then I was thinking this caste should be uh, getting evolved every period of time. So getting into the new systems which the humans follow. Then I was thinking, what is the new system which I could show as a evidence? Then that's how this mortuary thing came up, because this mortuary is a place where the dead bodies are inspected to find the cause of the death. Actually, it is a science to study how the person was dead. It is a very scientific thing to be seen from a very medical point. But Dalits are long back associated with death-related things. For example, when a person is dead, to cremate the dead body or to bury it, or to are playing drums in front of the uh, uh, final travel to the place. So these are the things which are long back associated to Dalits. Then when the new system comes to India, which is a process of science where to um, learn the bodies to find out the death. Since it is associated with death, this automatically the caste system comes inside, and the Dalits were brought here to work inside the mortuary. In actually, the Dalits are hired as a sanitary workers here. I mean, they usually hire them as a sanitary worker or a housekeeping employee. Then slowly they will be asked to help inside the mortuary by cleaning the floors or to move the dead bodies. Then slowly clean the dead body. Then finally they will perform the autopsy all alone. That is the point finally. So this project which explains a new system where the caste have evolved. So I'm trying to say, the caste is something which has a power to evolve in any new system, takes new shape, so that it is keeping it in a very strong and live way to continue its horror, or whatever we can call. Um, So before I talk about my mental state, I would talk about the employees who work there.
Yes.
I can share the second one. So it's visible.
Yes.
So he's called Maestri. I don't want to mention his name. He got retired at 2013, I guess. So it's been around 6 to 7 years. He's still continuing to work in the mortuary with the special request of the government and the doctors and deans at the hospital. He's one of the expert who's there in this mortuary to perform the autopsy and to teach the newcomers mostly. And he's a person who actually migrated from Andhra Pradesh to Tamil Nadu as a sanitary worker. So initially he started his career as a sanitary worker. Then, since he is a sanitary worker, through his friend he got recommended to a hospital, government hospital. Then he got hired as a sanitary worker at the government hospital. Then that's how his career started in the government hospital. Then slowly, he started moving into the mortuary cleaning, and all the procedure happened. Then in a few years he became a pro. That's how they give a title Maestri. So he's a person who usually train the newcomers as well as handle all critical cases in a very smooth way, because he have seen like a number of autopsies and performed so much. um, uh, but the situation for him is, even though he's a well experienced person, he cannot say to his neighbors or his distant families that he is working at a mortuary or doing post-mortem. So mostly he will say, I'm a sanitary worker or a gardener, because so this is an ID card which says he's a sanitary worker. And initial days he was doing just cleaning the wards, as well as he was allocated to do gardening inside the hospital. So even now, after the work at 4 p.m., mostly by 4 p.m. the postmortems will be winded up. Then he will go to his gardens, where these are the few gardens which he is very happy to show to everybody. This is the place I created. So he does this. And the thing is, he just said to the neighbors and others, I'm a gardener or a nurse assistant, or someone else, for example, like lab technician. He cannot claim it as a lab technician. He'll say, I'm a helper at lab. So this is the mental state what he is going through inside the hospital. He is considered as one of the most talented and respected person, who is recommended and requested by the government to come and work even after his retirement. But in outside, he couldn't show his talent. He is unable to climb his pride that he is a very very talented person at his occupation. So this
talented
was the
person who works with dead bodies. So I think that itself becomes problematic in our society.
The problem that I think, because the doctors also does doctors who does the forensic, they are very respected in the society, because they are one of the most powerful doctors over there, because they are connected with the police and judicial system. So they have a huge respect. But they are also actually these are the people who does the postmortem in the supervision of the doctors. Yeah, but the thing is, since they don't have that title or how to say, a legal designation for them, they seem to be very inferior, to say this, as well as. And this occupation is somewhat connected to the caste issue, caste things, right? Then the caste leads to the oppression in the society. So when they say, I do autopsy inside a government hospital, then this affects their own life in a way. Like, for example, this Maestri has a own house. Apart from him, few other persons who don't have a own house, they will seek for a this one, like a rented house. So when they go and say, my occupation is I do postmortem, then nobody will rent a house to them. Then that is first problem. The second problem comes to their children. When they say, my dad working at mortuary, that is not a good thing for them to say to their friends, as well as in the school also. It will be seen, it will be seen as a very impure, or something like that. So they are very keen to avoid the statements. So these are the things they were saying to me. We don't want to reveal to our neighbors. So every day they are actually living a fearful life. In very in a hidden way. I mean, outside they just act, but inside the office they are respected so much.
Right.
Kind of
yeah, and the issue of caste anyway is so linked with purity and impurity, in that sense, that this perhaps adds another layer to that. And therefore, whether it is getting a house on rent, or even for their kids to feel the kids and their friends and families to feel awkward that a particular child's father works in the mortuary, is something unclean in that sense.
Definitely, because basically everyone is somewhat afraid of the death,
Of
right?
death.
Like we are not very comfortable with death, not everybody. So and also first thing is the death and the ghost, all those supernatural things. Second thing is that caste but torture both combines together here, and put them in a situation to act throughout their life. Even after their retirement, they just want to live a drama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would like to come to now, Arun, you talking about how all this impacts you, because how many years has it been since you've been documenting this work? And what have you personally gone through in the process?
It's been 4 years I started this project, but it was on and off, not continuously for 4 years. But I was struggling to go to the mortuary to photograph in the initial stage, but not now. But I won't say I was extremely mentally ill because of this, but I was actually afraid to go to the mortuary and see the postmortem for the first time, and like for few autopsies I was actually afraid that during that time I was a little agitated in a way that I had these palpitation issues and anxiety problems.
Yes.
These are the few things I was going through, but after a point it was actually okay in a way. But the person like Maestri, who I don't know about his early stage, but now he is very calm and quiet. He is experienced to handle that. But the newcomers who's unable to handle all those things, they will be on alcohol or some other not all mostly alcohol. They'll be drunk to handle the postmortem for the first time. But most of the person who I met here, the Maestri level people, they don't do any drugs. They are like super clean, and they are very calm, and they see postmortem in a very different way. The only thing they are afraid of is the society to reveal what they are doing. Apart from that, they are not afraid of uh, what to say, their occupation, but they have little respect over the dead bodies in a way that the ghost will haunt you if you disrespect the bodies. They see in a very different way. Doctors see it is in a it's all infections which will haunt you, but the persons work there, they see it is a ghost or
yeah. So science and superstition kind of run together, depending on perhaps whatever your orientation has been over the years. And I mean, we are all, I would say, well aware that the hate crimes against Dalits have only increased over time. And I mean, in a recent report where Amnesty International, which is no longer allowed in India to function, claimed that 65% of hate crimes in India were against the Dalits. I'd also like to share beyond your work, what I had personally witnessed when I had gone to document a protest in Gujarat, where the Dalits were protesting for their rights, because over there, all over India, the cow is worshipped. But when the cow dies, who is going to be cleaning up the dead carcass of the cow is left for the Dalits. And then, therefore, all the menial work and the impalpable sort of work that is there is always left for the Dalits. I mean, I don't know, what else have your experiences been outside of the mortuary as well, in terms of, your experiences with the Dalits and what they are going through in terms of their rights, their sharing of voices?
When I try to go to the employees' household, they don't want to take me along with them. Rather than what they did, they just gave one more mediator from their own housing board colony to show me as a tourist, because they don't want anybody, any third person to come with them and to get revealed that they are working in the mortuary. So these are the scenes which I was little uh, okay, I could be able to understand the mental trauma they were going through just because of their occupation and their caste.
Right.
And one more thing, the housing board colony, the one colony which I went, which is very close to a biggest burial ground in the state, biggest in the biggest, very big. So, but the most of the people who are there, they are associated with the death related activity. Even then these people are afraid to reveal, what was they doing. And the doctors also trying to give them a proper designation by giving them a 6-month training as a mortuary worker, or a what is it, doctor assistant, something like that, because they are already trained. Just the designation matters. They are also fighting for that. If they fight and get some a designation to them, then maybe they could proudly say it, or instead of if they are not proud, at least they're not afraid to say it. So this will help them to get out of that fear, constant fear in their life.
And also perhaps a little bit of dignity in the work that they do. I mean, the work probably essentially will remain the same, but perhaps the title could make a difference to them in society, for their children, for the future of their children, perhaps.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe I'm just looking at the time. In the interest of time, I'm going to come back to you, Arun, with a question later. But maybe I'd just like to bring in Chandan right now to share his work, and then I will open up the debate to a couple of questions if we have the time. Thanks, Arun. I think your work is just so important. Not just because it talks about oppressed people or it documents them, but I think the key word that I'm taking from here is the dignity of labor, of whatever work that you do, and the larger conversation that we need to have, that the more dominant castes, even if they are becoming allies to the Dalit community, how is this conversation still continuing, and how does that impact the well-being of the people from the community? So maybe we could come back to that later. Thanks, Arun. I'd like to bring in Chandan now. Chandan, I hope you're back. Yes. Wonderul. Hi. Welcome back, Chandan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today with Chandan, I hope to see and share with you everyone two interesting bodies of work from his side. And just so you all know, Chandan Gomes has studied philosophy at St. Stephen's College in Delhi. Emotional and intellectual anxieties drive him as an artist. And I will leave it there and let you speak about these emotional and intellectual anxieties, Chandan.
Hi, thanks, Shuchi, for having me here. I'm slightly nervous because I've not been doing these talks since the pandemic began. I did 2, and then I just wondered what is the point.
This is a conversation just between us, and
yeah. But please bear with me. I'm, my thoughts might not be as coherent as
that's fine.
I would like it to be, but I'll try my best.
That's fine.
So basically, I'll just give a brief intro to my practice. I'm not someone who consciously works on projects, and that's because for many reasons. But one is that I don't like the ideas of beginnings and endings. To me, I've always worked with closure. I've always felt that, you can give closure to a journey, and then if you want to come back, you can pick up that thread and take it forward. So to me, the form that comes to me very directly to think about photography or to experience it is the form of the handmade book. Because somewhere the book can be a place, the handmade book can be a place where you can sort of, put all the stories that you have been experiencing, all the emotions that you have been experiencing, all the questions that you're living with, without the burden of, sharing it with another person. So, or without the burden of, making it intelligible, because it's that one copy that you make by your own hand, and perhaps you'll be the only person who'll end up seeing it for the largest part. And yeah, even today, where I'm coming from is, to be honest, I'm no expert, but I'm just, there are certain things that have driven me as a photographer. There are certain things that I've always thought within photography that came from my personal life. So this is a book that I've been making for a long time, and the form of the book keeps changing, but it's all handmade. And I thought I'll just share some excerpts from it, some journeys that I undertook or people I met.
Sure.
To me, it began with is this haiku?
It's not. Could you enlarge it for us?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah. Just maybe, yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. So this, I've been following the work of this Japanese haiku poet for some time, and this particular haiku is something that deeply touched me when I first read it. And it says, "In this world, we walk on the roof of hell, gazing at flowers." And of course, somewhere when I learned about Kobayashi Isa's life as well, I was very moved by the fact that the kind of life he led is the kind of poems, the haikus he wrote. But to me, these 2-3 lines has always been like, if I have to just understand the basic truth of life, it comes down to this, that both beauty and terror reside together, and there is no black and white there. We in that space you exist together. And somewhere life can tilt in one direction instead of the other, but it's always this balance between the two. And I've been just responding to this haiku. I like walking a lot. I just go out and I walk across my city, which is Delhi, or any city that I am in, but largely Delhi, because it's a city that I both know and yet I'm very sort of uncertain about. So these are some images that I've done, mostly in Delhi, some in other places, but I'll just kind of, one of the interests that about 10 years ago, when I was about to start photography, I was in my 3rd year of college. My mother went through a disorder. She had a memory disorder, and by then I decided I want to be a photographer. But the first question that came to my mind was, what does photography do if what you want to photograph is invisible? And to me, an ailment that pertains to the mind. And I when I say ailment, again, I question it. If it's not visible, what can I do? When I saw my own mother go through those phases of remembering things and forgetting things, and suddenly you're a complete stranger to her after after knowing this person for like 22 years of your life. So that became a quest, like that became something that I thought that I'll keep sort of this question, I'll keep alive in me throughout, and I'll keep try and respond to it. And also how the medium worked for me, like at this is a visit that I made to Banaras. Once she started improving, and that time I was also doing a story around honor killings, and I'd followed a particular family whose son was killed, and we were looking at the final rites in the river. And at this moment I felt extremely heavy. I felt extremely burdened by how things were and what I was feeling, and how do I make sense of this reality which was very new to me. But the image turned out to be very opposite. It is something that has that minimalism. There is that openness to it, and I started questioning that if I can't even understand, if I can't express what I'm exactly feeling, why does the image show me something else? And that became another point that started interesting me. Whereas this is in Bombay, the monsoons were approaching. There was almost a storm rising from the sea. And this is a moment where I was completely free. I was unburdened. I was actually kind of happy because things were becoming much better at home. And yet, I took this image and I keep thinking of this image over the last 6 years that, what does it mean, or what does it mean to me, just me? And it is again about, to me, it is always about that tipping point that, yes, things are nice and good, and it might just tip in the other direction, or it might not. It might become better. So it's always, sometimes for me, from a very layman's perspective, I could never really, this idea that you're expressing through photography was something that I always sort of failed at different moments in my life. If I just think in terms of the visual, if I dissociate the memory or what was happening in me, I got interested, of course, as someone who's walking in Delhi, I got really interested in this weird, and this was something I saw in a Dibakar Banerjee film, and it triggered me in a second film where, when two people are fighting in Delhi and there's a third person who intervenes, what generally happens is the third person gets beaten up. And, I first saw it in Oi Lucky Lucky Oi, and I was like, there's something true there. Like, let me just figure it out in the streets. And I started doing a story on this idea. And of course, it sounds funny, but it's also tragic because, I remember back then, and of course, it was also strange for me because sometimes they noticed me with the camera. I was always waiting outside these kebab shops, these liquor stores, or liquor stores that were next to kebab shops, especially in Northwest Delhi and West Delhi, waiting for a fight to happen. Like, it was a very strange feeling. But the more I thought of it, I realized that how, this entire idea that when you think of mental ailment or the way the discourse is built around it, it's always very serious. It always has to be something grave, something really big, But people, day-to-day people, normal people, are suffering from it in different degrees. And, they don't have the luxury to even think about mental health. And I started seeing a manifestation of it in the streets of Delhi or in the streets of cities, wherever I was. And this is one such person who had to kind of stitch himself up because, he was very scared to go to the police because he felt the police will put him in. And even if you go to hospitals, still even now, despite the law has changed, hospitals are always reluctant to treat someone who has inflicted injuries in a fight. They always want the police involved. I started meeting all kinds of people. I got more and more interested in this invisibility thing. People with strange disorders, people who, I always felt that there are people who are visible and then there are people on the margins. And even on the margins, there's scope for some kind of light fall. But then there's that great invisible mass. And that mass could be across stratas, across hierarchies. It could be someone who's extremely poor. It could be someone who's extremely rich, wealthy. This particular gentleman just had this disorder where he wanted to choke himself to death. And of course, it is never possible to do that. And he's using the same plastic. And of course, it's almost like a performance. It's an enactment. And you can see that the plastic is torn on the left. So there's always that air going in. So, and I've had several conversations with this boy who's now grown up. He's a father, he has a son. And there's no conclusion I've arrived at. And there's no reason as to why he's doing it. According to him, just his mind tells him to do it. His being tells him to do it. Hospitals started interesting me. I was very much interested in, I was reading a particular philosopher back then again. His name was Heraclitus, who wrote, "You never step into the same river twice." And to me, a city and a person is exactly like that. That was my fascination with cities, that each time, each evening or each night I'm venturing out, it's a different city. It's not the same. And there were these moments of unspoken intimacy that deeply interested me. So this boy was brain dead. He was on dialysis. He was a patient of cerebral edema. There was immense swelling in his brain, but it was this moment that stayed. And I used to spend a lot of time in the waiting areas of hospitals, just talking to attendants and families. And they thought that I also have someone inside. So, we built a bond. So this particular, the girl, it was Raksha Bandhan, it was Rakhi, and she really wanted to meet Pallav, and she said that, if I could do an image of them, and we got permissions to get into the ICU and all, and it was a deeply moving moment for me, because here the way she's looking at her, the way the way her hand is on the head, and the way she's holding that hand to give it agency. Almost pretend that, she knows the truth about her brother, but she doesn't want to accept it. She's created a different reality of it. And to me, that's what, and yet if I have to think of it medically, if I was to sit with my friends who have studied psychiatry or are in that field, they can also sort of categorize it as some kind of, a behavior which is off the normal. And that my conversation has always been with them, that how do you define this normal, and who defines this normal, and what is the politics of this normal?
Exactly.
This is my mother, and when she has to go through these bouts of just remembering and forgetting, and there was no way, I could, no matter being Arun's son or being from the family, I understood much later in my life that no matter how hard I try, I could not come close. That struggle was her own. And there was no medical reason, whatever reason it was triggered for, we never could really understand. There were different diagnoses, but we never. So this is the book that I started making then, and this is a book that I still keep making. I keep adding pages to it, and this is an entry I wrote back then on, how it felt with Ma. And somehow and that's why I said I've never made work, because I just don't know if it has to be put out, or what is the purpose of it. Like and that's again something I keep thinking about photography, that what is the purpose of making a work, and when does this become from a diary entry? When does it become a work, or should it become a work? And 10 years have passed in it, but I've never really managed to find an answer here. And again, the way I used to look at her, the way seasons passed, the way I used to spend time with her, and there was always that distance and that facelessness that existed to her that started happening. And I used to wonder that what is happening with me? Should I also, perhaps there's something wrong with me as well? And then it went on, patients of cerebral edema, patients who had swelling in the brain, people who kids specifically, teenagers who could not speak, who did not have agency of language. How do they express their pain? So this boy was 16 years old. He had a learning disorder. He had a growth disorder. And I used to spend hours and hours just waiting by his side. And, for the longest of times, he never grieved in front of me. And one day he started grieving. And to me, that was the point where he actually opened up to me. And I realized that it was not that smile, or it was not that happiness or hope, that perhaps the most real emotion that connects human beings is pain. And I'm not suffering, but pain, because it has a very physical side to it. When I think of it, I think no other emotion has a physical side to it. When you get slapped on your face, you feel it on the cheek, and you feel it in your ego. And to me, it was that language he built, and yet, no one could really understand him. Nothing could be done. He was just there in that ward. And all his physical ailments were being treated, but there was no way to ask him that, how are you feeling within? Or should that even be considered? Then, of course, patients of dementia, and, when again, your memories start losing themselves, and it is that point where, I always thought that the moment when someone wants to remember something, the eyes would lit up, and the face would lit up, because you have a certain kind of connection to the past. Whereas a lot of times I sort of observed the opposite, where when you completely forget is when you completely lit up, and that's because you no longer have that burden of memory, you no longer have that burden of the past. And that fundamentally started making me question the very basis of photography, which is very much driven by memory, right? Very much driven by this entire, the way it's very largely understood that it is preservation of memory of a certain kind. So it's also how that illness responds, and how the illness is sort of reflected through this very medium. Then, of course, this Nizamuddin Dargah was another place I used to visit a lot to look at struggling ghazal singers and Qawwali artists who came from different villages in Madhya Pradesh and UP and Rajasthan, because they thought that they'll become qawwals, they'll have gharanas, they'll sing, but none of them could break through. And to me, it was the struggle of an artist. You know, the struggle of an artist without any privilege. And yet, you know, I've met this gentleman so many times. I've recorded him. We have spent lovely evenings, I must say, together. And he has, you know, his entire body is mutilated. And because our relationship is of over 4 years, you know, I know that side to him. I've seen all of it. And yet I remember each time, you know, there are moments when he'll tell me, you know, mera ek photo khicho. And the moment he says that, suddenly he has that dignity to him. He has that poise that, you know, that okay, this is me. This is how I am. And I'm not scared to flaunt my injuries. I'm not scared to flaunt my mistakes or whatever it is. I'm not scared from how unfair this system has been to me. But, you know, suddenly that his face changes and suddenly he has that kind of poise to him. He has something. So which tells me that, you know, at the end, that artist is not gone. It's very much there. It's about somehow, I'm lucky that he reveals it. Or sometimes it's just about being patient and just kind of waiting for people to reveal actually not who they are, but be open enough to do that to a slight degree. Of course, we all are aware what is happening in the country right now. All the mob lynchings and all. But I always felt that, you know, a police, a mob is always a reflection of the society. So at the most, you know, the uncles and aunties who do yoga in the morning in the park next to your home are people who might hold that kind of violence against people they don't agree with. And I started seeing in Delhi, the RWA associations started becoming more and more stronger and powerful. And the way they started targeting, like, you know, people they knew they could target. Now, this could be a worker in their building, this could be their own watch car, this could be someone who's delivering something in their home. This was a delivery boy who was attacked in a neighborhood in South Delhi, and he was tied near the police chowki. Because I always felt that, you know, this is not by accident what we are seeing right now. It is not suddenly in 2014 that this has started happening. You know, maybe the current regime could be a catalyst, but somewhere people always held that deep-rooted violence within them. You know, and that's why it allows them to do what they do. It allows them to justify anything. So, you know, lynching is not important, but sending the meat for forensic testing becomes important. And it is very much accepted. And it's not a media spin. It's because people actually believe that agar wo meat, it's cow meat or whatever, the person deserves this punishment. So I started making this work and I kept adding these pictures. And again, I never thought of this as work. I just, in my walks and in these, this is again similar to look at, you know, how on railway tracks by Delhi, these little gangs exist, and they're all, you know, people who have had very difficult lifestyles, and they do smaller things like they kill rats, they build sheds, they bootleg, and how these gangs operate, and how I realized that, you know, often it's that weird, you know, when this film Kabir Singh came out and it was criticized a lot. I was thinking of this photograph because this person was killed by his best friend. And actually, when the police was taking his statement, he accepted it that I killed my best friend. It was almost a very toxic idea of brotherhood. That we as brothers were inseparable by railway tracks. Now that he has found someone else, I'm no longer valued. And then to see that if a film like that earns 300 crores, I'm not even surprised. I'm not even surprised because, you know, it is almost this idea. And where does it come into? I don't know where it seeps into, but this is the truth of it, that you end up killing what you love. At this moment, this was the truth. And of course, you know, all this, of course, there's an internal side to it. I often return to my flat. And it's strange that, you know, if it's locked for a few days, there's always one beautiful insect or something that, or, you know, a pigeon baby or something or the other is always dead. So, and I've been making pictures, and there's always a kind of deep beauty to them, but there's also that truth that, you know, this is somewhere what life is or becoming. So this is a spread from the book. So I just keep putting all these pictures. I don't know, as a person, I don't know, or even as a photographer or an artist, I don't know what this is. To be honest, my discourse is not really clear, but I just know that these are things that I deeply feel about. I might not be able to translate it into language or articulate about them. But this is something that gives me some kind of purpose after 10 years of taking so many shots in the dark. Uh, and I'll end with this image where, again, it's about, it comes to the self where, that what you were asking, Arun, and I was listening to his reply, and that how does the self come into this?
Yes.
Funny that, this book was given to me with someone who I was with, and now that person is long gone, but the book remains, and, that thought remains. And of course, that entire idea that why does someone leave, again, comes from this thing of how your mind, how your emotions, what you are, what you reveal and what you conceal, sort of how it works with another presence and another personality. So yeah, right. I think that's it.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing your, overall journey and a bit of your observations about, how people behave, how our society has become actually, and how it is impacting, in a way, the so-called well-being of people and yourself as well. And I wanted to come back on again, your anxieties with this particular work called Invisible Cities, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to come back to that for you to share like your experience. And I find this work very interesting and also a very interesting portrayal of how you try to visualize a feeling of anxiety. So maybe if you could share a little more on that.
Yeah, I'll quickly, actually, this is, this is the only write-up I have, or whatever it is. It's a quote by Calvino from his novel Invisible Cities. And I really I've always felt that cities are like organisms, they are like living beings. They have a consciousness of their own. And I got this little grant to make a work on Gurgaon, and I've always been very scared of Gurgaon because I've grown up in Old Delhi, and within Old Delhi in a old Mughal garden, in a little village in that garden. So for the first time I saw flyovers in Delhi, which was much later in my life. By the time I was already like 16 or 17, I was very scared to even cross the road. And it bothered me that, in my part of the world or in my part of the city, you can just walk from one roof to the other, and there's nothing, there's no traffic, and suddenly it is a matter of life and death here because my mind just could not coordinate things. And Gurgaon, I went to Gurgaon much later in my life. I always was scared of a city where everything felt the same, where everything seemed the same, whatever images I had seen. That if I'm on a flyover and buildings are passing, then it is the same city. It's like one endless loop that you are in. And that's where that excited me and scared me. And I took up this, applied for this, and I got this grant. And when I went to Gurgaon, of course, a different world opened. But this work is basically about how each time I was going to Gurgaon, it was a different city to me. And yet there was a deep tension that existed between me and the city, but also an intimacy that I started building very strongly because at night specifically, I saw people who felt exactly like me. They were like people. I always felt that I've always liked to stand over flyovers or one of those bridges and all, especially flyovers in Delhi. And sometimes you just keep looking. And that's because, I always feel that as a photographer, as a photographer, as a person, I don't have enough stories in my own life. Like, perhaps my life in itself would be that empty or boring that I have to look.
Perhaps you find the stories only at night when you walk. Because I'm seeing that as a common element. I don't know if that's a sort of an inherent representation of a little anxiety or fear or emotions, but clearly a large part of your work is based and constructed in the night. So could you maybe comment on that?
I think I've not really thought of it. I think one is that there is a certain kind of anonymity there. I like railway tracks a lot. I like certain spaces a lot. I don't know, perhaps all my life I've always felt that I've never fitted into anything. be it school, be it college, be it even the photography scene or the art scene or anywhere for that matter. So there's that anonymity that I really like about it, that, you can put your head down in the street at night and walk and no one cares. It seems to me like a great equalizer. It might just turn out to be wonderful, or it might just be bolts and bolts of terror, and one doesn't know. But I like how it makes people equal. I like how no one really cares where you are from, what your privilege is, but if you were to be slapped in the street, you will be. No one. It doesn't make much of a difference. Or if someone was to open their space to you, open their being to you under any place, even a rickshaw, that again is a gift. So perhaps that is something that deeply interests me about the night. Or there's that peace I feel, I can walk, and I'm not looking for calm, or I'm not looking that I'll be safe. I just know that is a reality that I'm open to. Whatever might happen, okay, it will happen. It's fine. I'll take it. So that's where I thought that Gurgaon has to be done like that. If I'm scared of the city, I have to maximize that fear. It's like, what you learn, like do what you don't want to do.
Right. And could we just see some more of the work that you have made?
Yeah. So it's a big mixture of cell phone pictures, but the first kind of cell phones that came out 5, 6, 7 years ago, and your normal DSLRs. I mean, I was just having fun. Maybe I don't even know whatever I was seeing and feeling. I was trying to sort of put it together. It was nice. I ended up making some interesting friends, especially a lot of builders who had a lot of illegal plots. So wherever you point a camera in Gurgaon, an SUV will stop, and 10 men will come out of it with bats and whatnot.
Right.
And
how did you negotiate your way out of that?
Yeah, because wherever you point your camera, there's something wrong there. There's some rules being broken as far as property laws are concerned. So I got stopped, I got intimidated like so many times that I got used to it eventually. So I used to carry some of these prints with me, and I used to show him, and I say, I'm just an artist.
I'm just an artist.
Yeah.
Who walks around at night making these.
This is it.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuchi.
Thanks, Chandan. I think it's very important for us to also talk about how we are personally as people, as photographers, because often our lens is always on the outside, pointed towards the outside a lot of times, and very few people I have seen have pointed the lens towards themselves or what they feel. I think just in the interest of time, I'm going to first take up a few questions that we have, and maybe then come back to Robin. I just wanted to quickly check, because I know I had to stop you midway, but is there something more that you would like to share before I move over to the questions?
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Okay. So I'm just going to go over quickly to the questions. Aman Singh says he wants to ask Ronnie Sen about his Jharia project, like how it started, about the permission and a bad encounter during the project, as it's the mafia related place, and what was it a pre-visualized project, or did you go with the flow?
Jharia, I started working with 2 French filmmakers. I knew about Jharia, but I knew about the underground fire there. But while I was working, I had no desire to photograph. And even if there is mafia and whatever, I mean, you can work there. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's like working in any part of the country. So it's not really a problem as such. Right. Less to worry from the mafia than the state agencies, actually. Anyhow. Right. But what was the other part of the question?
Was it a pre-visualized project or have you gone with the flow?
No, not really. I mean, as I said, I had no desire to go take pictures. So I was only carrying my phone. And the landscape was something which I got overwhelmed with, with the underground fire, which has been burning for 100 years. So I started taking landscapes, but I thought that, all the masters, as far as painters are concerned, and all photographers have primarily photographed landscapes in a horizontal format. And today we look at the phone like 6 hours, 7 hours a day, where everything is vertical. So I thought about making vertical images, and that's what I kept on doing. And I made thousands of images on my phone, and that's how the work kind of shaped up. And eventually got a Getty Instagram grant for it in 2016, and then it became a book, and later it became an exhibition at the gallery called Turk, where it was titled Fire Continuum. If you go to Turk website, you will find a lot of information on the whole work, Fire Continuum, where Christopher Pinney has written an essay on the work. So you can download the catalog of Fire Continuum, and you will also find Christopher Pinney's essay on Turk website, actually.
I'm going to a question that's both for Robin and Ronnie, which says, it's by an anonymous attendee. It says that it seems as if Robin and Ronnie here have us guessing most of this work, and I'm left wondering what their work has to do with mental health. It comes across like a romanticized version of mental health. Fact or fiction is blurring. What kind of truth are you trying to get at? Would you like to address that?
Where you go, Ronnie?
Yeah. Go ahead, Robin.
Oh. Robin wants to say something?
No,
I can say, but
I can.
You want to go?
I'm yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's I photograph what I see. I have a very. It's interesting seeing the other work that's been presented. I have a very clear delineation in my work between what is reportage and what is portraiture. Portraiture is absolutely is posed and whereas constructed by me. And the reportage pictures, I never have any input into how the person is presented in front of the camera. It is what is there. So, I know that there's a conversation around what is truth in photography and what is real. And obviously it very much depends on who's holding the camera and which way you're looking. But those images are what is happening. So I think, I don't know, there was I don't know if that answers the question, but it's in no way a construction, or it is those pictures of people in chains, those pictures of people in prisons, those are real case scenarios that are actually happening.
Right. Ronnie, would you like to say something?
I mean, it's a funny question because it depends a lot on what is the work is precisely made for that, to challenge preconceived notions about mental health and any kind of public health issues. Fact and fiction. Fact is, I mean, what is fact? What is fiction? These are all very complicated things. Drug addicts in India were prescribed by doctors to go into mental asylums to get electric shocks throughout the world, not only in India, even a decade ago. And that's based on facts, that's based on evidence, that's based on scientific development of some sorts. So, and these have not helped us. You know, the drug laws that the society have made based on facts have ostracized different communities, people who never had the money for legal battles in the court. So all the facts of the society have not really helped many of us. And when you talk about mental health is a huge sort of issue. What my work does is it only deals with drug addiction and alcoholism, and looks at it from a basic sort of it looks at it as a basic human rights issue more than anything else, where you can't there is massive moral prejudice in the society about drug addicts, which we have seen recently in the Bollywood scandal, which happened, where everybody was saying that, you know, these are all drug addicts in Bollywood and whatever, and a lot of things were being said, and a lot of people think that, you know, bad people do drugs, and so there's a lot of value judgment about addiction, which I wanted to counter, which I wanted to say that addiction and alcoholism are there in the society. It can happen to anyone. I mean, the desire of human beings to test with drugs are as fundamental as our desire to, you know, eat and drink water and anything. They are fundamental desires of human beings, and they have existed through the entire civilization of Homo sapiens. It's only recently that we have made laws to put people behind bars because of consumption of any mind-altering, mood-changing chemical, where you have alcohol, which is completely legalized. And so the thing is, I want to get high, and I decide to drink alcohol, and that is fine by the society. And somebody else decides to get high, and he's using cannabis, so you put him behind the prison for 20 years. For example, if you have cannabis which is being sold in Los Angeles over the counter, government mandated, based on facts. On the same hand, in South Asia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Philippines, you will be killed if you smoke cannabis. Fact-based, mandated by the government. So here is your difference, you know, between fact and fiction. And fiction here is only reflected through personal memories. So
I
it's not
think we
fiction
could,
out of the blue.
yeah, and we could request whoever this question is from that maybe they should just perhaps check out your film and see if they still have questions. They can always write to you. You know?
No, sure. But I just wanted to say that psychiatry, and if you read, say, somebody like Michel Foucault, he has all his life talked about the problems of these disciplines like psychiatry and the obsession of psychiatry and the justice system to put people to sort of ostracize people who are sort of not normal. They can be people who are insane, or people who are drug addicts, etc. And that is our crisis. That is the crisis of modernity. In primitive societies, these things don't happen. So when I work with the primitive tribes in India, like the Baigas, they don't have such problems with alcoholism. They don't ostracize each other on the basis of who gets high on what substance, etc. They're very much part of the society. And maybe the reasons are there is not so much inequality like we have in our society, where one guy is traveling on a Mercedes Benz and the other one doesn't even have money for the dinner. So anyhow, I mean, it's a larger sort of conversation.
Right. Thanks, Ronnie, for addressing that. To Arun, an anonymous attendee has commented, excellent work. How many hospitals or mortuaries across India employ Dalits in this practice? In your research, have you ever found one employee from an upper caste in this profession? And is this still going on? How does the government or Ministry of Health, how have they reacted to your story? So there are multiple questions in one.
So
do you have a research on in terms of numbers, how many Dalits are
The research is, all about the one I made only because the government don't hold any official data, So the mortuaries I went in Gujarat as well as in Tamil Nadu, what I witnessed, all of them who work there are Dalits. Then the second thing is through a scroll article, and I spoke to that journalist Sony. Mortuaries in Calcutta also have employees who belongs to Dalits, and especially those employees at Calcutta mortuary, they're doing it for the third generation. I mean, his grandfather, then the father, and the son right now, who's doing the job because to get a government quarters. There are too many noble reasons to get the job, but it's kind of a family occupation as well as caste related occupation. So this is one thing. Then what is the second question? How does the government,
how does the
Ministry of
government
Health, so far the government or the Ministry of Health, I don't know whether they have seen my story or not, but no direct response yet. But the tricky part of this thing is police are only the police involved cases will be done. I mean, will come to the mortuary, right? And I mean, not all the death will come to mortuary, only to find out the cause of the death. So the police is already involved, and the police know who does the postmortem. So it's a part of the government. So government already knew it. And second thing, when there is a RTO inquiry, and then again the RTO will come, but in front of RTO, only doctors will do it, but the other mortuary employees will be assisting them. So a lot of all higher authorities and government already knew that. I mean, it's not something which is very hidden or secret. Everybody know things happen, but okay, so what? Like, you are supposed to do this and then do it. I mean, this was the attitude I believe. And
so basically the normalization of this role that is relegated to the Dalits, the postmortem or the cleaning.
Yeah, that is the whole point. It's not only the postmortem, it's all about death or any menial jobs which was already associated to Dalits. Then they're doing it in a very new form. So it's like, what is your problem? Like, it's the normal. It's a very new normal form. And the second thing, any upper caste in the profession, I heard in Kerala, apart from Dalits, there are also backward classes and upper classes who are doing it, but there's no evidence, and I couldn't penetrate into the mortuaries to get the data. That was the scene. If I get a chance to get into other states and officially do something, not or unofficially to get the data, then it would be very nice. That's what I'm searching for. But hope in one day things will come together and I could make a data according to this.
Sure. Thank you, Arun. One last question for Chandan. Beautiful work. How do you work on a story? Do you have something in mind before you shoot, or you make a story on a collection of images that you have shot? Or do you connect images which are shot with no prior intention to the story? How do you write the concept or the content before or after the shoot?
No, actually, I don't have anything in mind before I shoot, to be very honest. What I'm looking for is a very real experience, in the sense that, see, I work with very basics. Like, I know that walking is something that I love doing, even if it puts a certain, not just in terms of it being cathartic, but the opposite as well. Sometimes you walk and see things and they affect you in a very different way. They don't take that pressure off, they add that pressure. And if I'm walking and if I know that I can take photographs, or I know how to take photographs, I just take those images. And that's why I said that I like to put all my work in handmade books, because it becomes, if nothing, it becomes a catalog of those memories. And what I'm feeling, I write. Sometimes I just write what the name of the person or what part of the city it was, or something that I was remembering. Images also have that quality, or not just images, anything that you see or experience has the quality of evoking memories. I might be walking over a railway station and I might just sort of remember my mother, or remember something else, or a tree over my house. So that's it. I keep putting everything in these handmade books, these diaries. I keep adding pages, and every now and then I just revisit them. So when when I was asked to do this talk, I found the idea really interesting because, again, I am neither an expert nor am I someone who's. I'm thinking and dealing with these things, but it is largely through those experiences that I'm having on the streets. It's through the experiences that I'm having when strangers open their lives to me, one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So I think the book in itself, that handmade object, just becomes a way to tell your story, and you can just pick up pages from there and say, share it here, or put it up on a wall, or just you're sitting with friends and you're talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Chandan. I think just to wrap up our experiences that all of us have shared, first of all, thank you all so much. These are some very different directions that each one of you is sort of taking on in terms of maybe not primarily with the intention of working on mental health, but it does somewhere play around in the larger narratives of your work. And my last question, just to sum up our conversation today, is really, who has the right to tell the story? Also, there are these supposed savior syndromes that are there that many photographers have taken. I know we talk about documenting oppressed people, communities. Our intentions are all noble. But this whole speaking on behalf of, it still puts you at the forefront of somebody else's story. And I wanted to understand, where do you position yourself over there? Like, I know that Robin and I were talking about this the other day, that racism again is not something that's new right now, or Black Lives Matter may have become a hashtag, but the oppression has been there for many, many, many decades. And when, as a white male photographer, you go to Africa and you are documenting the conditions over there, are you ever questioned about maybe your position? And I know that maybe a mentally challenged person might not be able to share their own story, but then in that case, do institutions have that right? It's a question that even I've not really been able to find an answer to. So I'm just opening up the debate. Maybe Robin, you could start and then I'll go on to the others. This whole, who is speaking on behalf of whom,
Okay. There's quite a few questions there, and it's really complex. So I think we can start off by saying that there have been massive and unforgivable injustices caused by colonizers and people predominantly, I think, from who have similar skin coloring to me. So I totally understand if there is resistance to having white people tell the stories of others, and I think this, the othering is I think it's something really that we have to talk about, and it's good that I think that it's something that's been highlighted. I think even before Black Lives Matters, and when I started doing my work in 2011, I was questioned about whether I was the right person to be telling those stories. I think that there has to be a much greater balancing of who tells whose stories, and I think that predominantly photography has been controlled by those of us who have privilege, and I think that goes way back to not just because maybe we get preferential access to publications and funding, but also goes back to just that I think that some of us were privileged from very young in terms of our exposure to as a kid, having National Geographic magazines is not something that a lot of young African boys would have had had a chance to have access to. You know, so. So it's complex and there's long sort of historical stuff there. So I think that as so my personal belief that if you have privilege, you also have a responsibility to be able to support people who don't have it, to be able to access some of the mediums that you have. So I am trying to do that in my own way, whether it's enough or not, it's for others to judge. But so on our website, and if we had more time, I would have spoken about this, but you know, we have a what we call user-generated content, where we have the platform for people with mental health issues to be able to share their own stories themselves. So it's completely removing intermediaries. We run a lot of workshops, especially in the Global South, and for people with mental health issues, and with my other work with other marginalized groups, especially from marginalized LGBTQI+ communities. So I think that I'm trying to, in some way, balance and support through the privilege I have to have those who don't have it. Mm-hmm. But I think also, I also would like just to say, I guess, in defense of white storytellers, is that while I think that there are generations past who have committed horrendous atrocities, one, it's important that we denounce that, but two, we also shouldn't necessarily, I feel, you know, be blamed for it directly. You know, I did not know King Leopold, and I do not sanction his actions in Congo. But at the same time, I think that we also have to acknowledge that some of us live in societies that benefited from those atrocities. Yeah, this is a big conversation which we go on and on, but right. I think I should probably let people speak about it.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, Chandan, what do you feel about this? I mean, every story comes with a certain responsibility, but also giving the agency at times, I mean, to the person who you're photographing, rather than making them just a subject. What do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think, Shuchi, you should do a separate panel.
On this.
To be honest, this is not really a question that can be answered just say in a line or two. Like, just a simple thought. If someone comes from privilege, if someone is born in privilege, it's not their fault, right?
Sure.
And all my life, I had that resentment against privilege because I grew up in a village, only to later understand that it's not like the way I was born in a certain space. Those people are born. So to me, that entire debate on nepotism, it is important, but it's not everything. You know, it is, you just can't help it. But anyways, what I can speak of is where I come from, what I see, what I feel about it. It's like, see, when you are in a protest, the great thing about a protest is that you build a shared imagination. Two anonymous protesters, two protesters who are strangers to each other can be there for each other, right? You build those solidarities. To me, walking out in the city and meeting the people I am, craving to actually meet them, because, you know, somewhere I might just have perhaps no one in my own life, perhaps, if I have to just think of it very, very strongly and put it out without any sort of, you know, tapestry. It is almost like that two strangers are sharing that solidarity. It is a protest of a certain kind. It's just that it's not political. It's not happening at Jantar Mantar. It's not against Narendra Modi. It is perhaps a protest against your own being. It is a protest against how you feel in a particular moment and how that other person is feeling in that moment. And those two presences somehow connect with each other. So that's why, and that's another reason I've never put this work out as a work, because it's not a project. That's why it only exists in these handmade books. You know, the day I know what my position would be, I would perhaps put it out. You know, I'll make actually a book out of it and make, I don't know, 500 copies of it, or put it out in an exhibition. But I'm not too sure right now. But I feel it is, for me, it comes from that space. It is just that people are always looking, people are always seeing, people are always waiting. You know, they're always waiting for another person to walk into their lives, even if it's for a moment, even if it's for that one little meeting in some in the metro. So that's where I come from when I share this work that I did. Yeah. But I'll definitely listen to the talk that you do on that larger question.
I hope that happens.
Be an anonymous attendee. And
No. You don't get to be an anonymous attendee. We all have to participate. Ronnie, any thoughts over there? Or do you agree with Chandan? This is a much larger conversation to be had separately.
I mean, the larger conversation, obviously, but then, also address the deep-rooted inequalities we have in India.
Yes.
The Black Lives Matter or the recent sort of discussion, not recent, going on forever, about the problems, the violence on the blacks in the US and the white supremacy, etc., etc. I mean, but as far as, okay, if we bring it down to the politics of representation here in India, we have systemic oppression in this country, which is multifaceted. It's, there is casteism, as Arun was, talking about, and we never say Muslim lives matter. We never say Dalit lives matter. And as far as, getting assignments and all of these things are concerned, and when we question people that why a white photographer is photographing something in India or Africa, the same thing can be questioned to a super privileged photographer in Delhi or Bombay who goes to a village and photographs. It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
The skin color makes no difference at all. As far as I'm concerned, I don't look at that in a way where only by the virtue of me not having a white skin absolves me of my privilege. It makes no sense. It's a stupid binary. Just by being...
the point of view that with you and the camera in your hand already gives you a privilege in terms of telling that story. But in the context...
I don't think so, Suchi.
Right.
I don't think so. Today, photography is extremely democratic, and mobile phones are there, and anybody can be a photographer. I think who has the power of distribution? Say, when we question National Geographic or New York Times or Time Magazine or Washington Post, why is the onus on them? The onus should be on Indian publications. What are they doing? Why no photographer from my generation wants to be associated with a newspaper or a magazine in the last 10 years? Is there any photographer from our generation who has gotten an assignment from a India Today or a Outlook or a Frontline or a Times of India or a Hindustan Times or whatever? Does that exist? Why should the onus on be someone who is 4,000 miles away from us? We need to ask the right questions here, where we are working, where our audience is. If we think that Traffic is going to do a story on the Dalit issues, that's absurd. So, and the fact that any photographer who has had a certain kind of privilege, and not only about a photographer, about, it can be any medium, who says what, it's not only the skin color or say patriarchy. I mean, women are as patriarchal as men in this country.
Absolutely.
So it's not only about a biological condition. So
no,
I think,
of course, I think where this context of this question comes in is especially when, as photographers, no matter what the background, with Robin, this was a specific question because we were having a conversation the other day if he was already being questioned about this, in the current debate. But where I have positioned this question is largely because a lot of times when we are documenting, there is this question of how will these images, which are often quite graphic in nature at times, how is this going to impact the person you are photographing just because they don't have a voice or they are not able to articulate on their own rights. And that's what I was trying to put out here to all of us. So,
but that is, I just want to make a quick point. That is the burden, which this burden should be shared by everyone.
Everybody.
Just the fact, the biggest problem with the medium of photography is it deals with images and it deals with real people, and there is a perceived idea of reality. The same burden should be shared by journalists who are writing daily news.
Right.
They are as graphic. You open a newspaper and you see the number of stories on sexual assault and rape and the way they have been written in the Indian media. Absolutely. So it's not only the photographers who should be questioned, it's the general sensationalism. And I mean, Sadanand Menon had written a great article on the distress of documentary photography way back, I think 15 years back or something, and where it dealt about, I mean, he talked about certain kind of ethics, etc. But I think that photographers are always more under the spotlight. Other than photographers, you will never question this to a musician or a filmmaker, or a person who is writing a novel. You'll never question that person. But the same contradictions of consent is even there.
No, of course. And books are known to be banned. And I know that here in the South, there is a huge now debate on, these music sabhas that happen and these spaces that, and the people that it gets limited to. So I know this just will become a much larger conversation. So just going to bring in Arun at the end. Arun, are you there?
I'm there.
Yeah, hi. Would you like to, share some thoughts on, because I know that in the recent times, we've been reading a lot on really who has the rights to tell the story, like, for example, and how is this telling of the story affecting the mental health of the people involved? So are there any comments that you would like to leave us with?
See, even I too faced these questions, but the thing is, first of all, here what I need to focus is, the intention, why I want to do this project, like why I photographed this scene. That is, who's the photographer, or where he comes from, what he is trying to say, all those, and the how to say, it's all, there are a lot of interpretations involved in it, right? Like how you are showing the story, and it's depends on every photographer, or depends on every viewer, it changes, like, so we cannot completely conclude into one point, this is the person, or is the right person to do the story, or say, or talk about it. It's I'm not very convinced with that point, but what I feel is, if the photographer or any artist whose intention is right and genuine, then that's fine. That's what I feel. And the subjects involved, all the subject thing is a very subjective matter only, because if how I photograph the subject, and whether they are standing or they're posing on a chair, all those things, I'm not very convinced with that. Like, it depends on the storyline, like what I want, what I'm supposed to say. It changes. So, and also, when I started this work, I was photographing in a different way. Then, in a point of time, maybe I will realize I need to do it in a much different way. Then, I don't say it is better or something bad. So. So the intention is the one which matters, all about, even, the Dalit story need to be done by a Dalit or some other one. It won't work in that way, I guess.
Right. Okay, then. Yes.
One last thing I just wanted to say is that I think intention is I totally agree with Arun, that intention is really important. I think also impact as well, is like, how does it impact those people? either positively or negatively. And I think just it's really, really important that we help to, bring up and support marginalized people to tell their own stories. I totally agree with that. But one of the things that, just to throw a little bit of controversy in there, one of the little things that upsets me is I've been attacked for photographing people with mental health issues, not because they have mental health issues, but because I'm a white person and they're Black, and I've been told I shouldn't be telling those stories. The thing that upsets me is when I receive comments that really, really focus on that. And what I've documented is somebody who's been in chains maybe for years. And it's like, that's not what angers them. That what they're angry about is the person taking the picture.
Right.
And I just kind of think, where are your, I totally understand the sentiment, but where are your priorities when what angers you is who takes the picture rather than someone who's been enslaved and chained up for years and years? And I wish that energy was focused on bringing an end to the real human rights abuses. I don't believe that I'm abusing somebody by taking their photograph. And if I am, it's nothing compared to putting them in chains. And so I really wish that energy was focused more onto what I feel is the real abuse going on.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to kind of summarize our conversation today. And I know this debate can go on and on. Thank you so much, all of you. I hope that everybody will also join us for a second part of this discussion that's happening next Saturday. We will put that out very soon next week. And I look forward to any comments or any thoughts that our audience has. Please feel free to write to us. Please also consider supporting artists when they are making all this work, especially in these hard times. It becomes even more important to support photographers and artists towards the work that they do. And if you'd like to also support the CPB Foundation, we wouldn't mind that at all, because we're also a small team that's really struggling through these times. So thank you everyone for taking out the time. And I hope that we are able to carry on with this conversation at another point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. Don't forget to all of those who have signed up for Ronnie's film. I hope to see you there. Thanks. Thank you.